This is why Superman works alone.
Hi folks, welcome to the show. I'm Luke Hector and I'm the Broken Meeple. This is a show devoted to board games where I give reviews, top 10s and always give my honest opinion regardless of the consequences that might befall me. We'll get on with the top 10 in just a second, but first I want to say a quick word from the sponsor of this channel. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So tonight I'm doing my top 10 two-player advanced games. Finally, you were very patient with the casual and next step top 10 lists I did. Well, now we're going to take on the advanced list, which was definitely the hardest one to do for two reasons. Firstly, I had to actually record the start of this video and my number 10 again because the battery ran out in a camera and corrupted the video file. It's impossible to recover a .dat file these days. So that's one reason. The other reason is that my shortlist was a bit smaller for this one. It was harder for me to come up with a lot of games that I felt were not only good at two players but also advanced level. And we're talking like pretty advanced, heavy Euros, heavy games, heavy thematic games, but certainly like, brain burners at the best of times. And I know that there's going to be ones on this list that some people are like, ooh, I don't know, and there's certainly going to be ones I'm missing off which are like, how dare you not put a game like that? Well, different strokes for different folks, but then I guess it's just a case of whether you might prefer it with two or whether you prefer it with more. That's going to happen, but hopefully the ones that I miss out on this list I will cover in the honourable mentions. If I still haven't mentioned your game, then by all means get it in the comments down below. But without further ado, I'm not going to spend too much time waffling because, well, this is the second time I'm recording this, so on with the show. My number 10 is a little bit of a weird one because I am kind of stipulating that this is mainly when you play it 1 versus 1 on an app. But also, if you want to get the physical version out, you can play it 1v1. I certainly don't like to play this game with 3 or 4, even if I'm including AI opponents, because, well, takes a while. Yeah, there's a game I prefer to this one, but I'm happy to play it with any player count, so it's not on this list. But I gotta give Through the Ages props where it's due. This is a very fun Euro-based civilization card game, building up a tableau of cards in front of you while also managing your resources. And if you understand how the corruption mechanic works in your first game, then you're doing better than most people who play it. Yes, it's an incredibly fiddly mechanic, and thankfully the app sorts that problem out for you. Hence, the app has basically killed the physical version of this game. There's almost no reason to own the physical game when you have the app. It's that good. They literally nuked their own game with the app.
And I'm the bad guy?
Now granted, if you want to get the physical copy out and you don't mind spending a good 3 to 4 hours playing a two-player game, then by all means do. It'll still be fun, but this is really going to be for two people who know the game well. For me, I don't know the game that well, so I pretty much just play it on the app. But even then, I'm only going to play it against one AI. I just don't see the need to have a third and fourth one in there. It's much better as a two-player game than it is as multiplayer, and I'm pretty sure most veterans of Through the Ages probably agree on that fact. You'll get some that like it with multiplayer, but frankly I suspect that if you ask them if they prefer it at 2, they probably do prefer it at 2. My number 9 is a classic card game. The classic card game, like should be in the top 10 of Board Game Geek rankings, classic card game. This one has kept most shops in the black by itself. It is that much of a phenomenon, going on strong even after 30 years people are still playing this. Granted, the people who published this are doing a really bad job at marketing it, but still, credit where it's due, Magic the Gathering is still one of the best advanced two-player games out there. And yes, it's advanced, I'm sorry. You can buy a couple of starter decks, which is great, and that will probably maybe be more mid-weight level, but as soon as you start adding boosters and having to do your own collecting and deck building, yeah, come on, that's an advanced concept for many people. I mean, I actually prefer to just net deck, which is go onto these online sites and just go, oh, that looks like a fun deck, I'll build it, and then you try piloting it, because you can give someone the best deck ever, they'll still possibly lose if they don't know how to pilot it. That's the way it is. It works brilliantly for the co-op games I play. But with Magic the Gathering, it's just a great two-player head-to-head duel. I mean, if you can get those dual decks, they're fantastic, they're balanced against each other, and they were a great idea. You can grab the Commander decks if you want to use the big 100-card decks, or failing that, just grab any starter deck. But Magic the Gathering is still a good, fun experience. I used to play it back at university. I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt and then sold it because I couldn't afford the rent.
Shut up and take my money!
It really does suck your money out. I've played a lot of weird card games back then, a lot of anime-based ones as well. I forget the names of half of them. But the game is still really solid. It's just a case of whether you want to play it casually or whether you want to play it in the more deck-building side of things. But even if you do just grab a couple of starter decks, you've got different creatures and different effects and all these different timing things. I mean, there's a reason there's an FAQ that's about 20 miles long for this game. There's still a decent amount of rules and edge situations that you gotta bear in mind, and woe betide you if you buy a Commander deck, because you're gonna have 100 unique cards that you need to get used to. It definitely has its fair share of advanced concepts, but it's a really great game and it deserves to be in the top 10 of BGG. Would I still own it now? Probably not, but that's not to say I don't think it should be up there, because after 30 years, it's still going strong, stronger than a lot of other games out there. It deserves the credit. For my number 8, we're going to Mind Clash games, and this is a more obscure title from Mind Clash games that most people may not necessarily have heard of, or maybe have just not got the chance to play, because it definitely is quite advanced on the rules and the way it works. Typically you can play this with 2v2, but it is also possible from the game to play it 1v1, which is a pretty good way to play it, and that is Cerebria. Cerebria the Inside World. It's basically if you took the Pixar movie Inside Out and turned it into a giant 3-hour Euro game.
Right after you eat this!
When you play 2v2, you've got two people on the positive emotion side versus two people on the negative side, and that works fine. It's still good fun. But you can simply just play 1v1. And one person could control two spirits if they really want, or just have one spirit. But it seems to work really well as a 1v1 game. It's advanced, one person's got their board that you're customizing, the other person's got theirs, they've both got opposing things they're trying to do, it's a head-to-head. It works surprisingly well, despite the fact the game was originally designed for 2v2. But I'll play it 1v1, I've even played it 3-player with the expansion, where you've got one positive, one negative, and one balance. Although, word of warning, when you play with that expansion, you really do need to keep the balance in check, no pun intended, because if you're not certain how to play against the balance faction, you will get hosed. But, you know, it's still fun that way. But honestly, just buy the normal game, don't worry about the expansion, and just play it 1v1 or 2v2, and it works an absolute treat. I've still got it on my shelf downstairs, I believe, and yeah, it is hard to get to the table because it's a bit of a rules hog and also a bit more involved. I mean, it is Mind Clash, what do you expect? This is an advanced list after all, but I get a kick out of this one. It just looks gorgeous, it's got a... It's not even kind of a race, it's a back and forth area control style game, but with multiple actions and a dozen million ways to customize your own emotion character. You know, you've got all these different things that you can get good at and different powers that you can unlock, then you've got all your emotion cards. There's a lot going on in this game, but I really like it, and I seem to be one of the few people that do.
This is the way.
My number 7 is one of the newest games I've played and reviewed. Yeah, I've only played and reviewed it this year. That's how new this is. And yes, you can play it multiplayer. And yes, it does work very well when you get the full count of 4 in. But, and here's a caveat with this, primarily this is if you have the expansion to it or the extended edition. I'm talking of Hegemony.
What?
Yeah, the game that I reviewed only about, what, like a month and a half ago? Or barely that, yeah, like a month ago? That huge asymmetric role game that I played on Paul Grogan's channel live, and when I did that massive review. What's that doing on this list? Well, because it works great as a 1v1 game as much as it does multiplayer. You have the capitalists against the working class, and both of them are going at each other. One's trying to build companies and make a profit, doesn't want to pay high wages. The working class, on the other hand, wants the high wages, but also wants to meet the needs of all the people.
Help! Help! I'm being repressed, bloody peasant!
Now you're probably thinking, well hang on, then you're missing the middle class in the state. This is where the caveat comes in, because it's still great fun and deserves to be on this list at 7 without the expansion. But if you have the expansion, you can add AIs to the mix. The automated opponents, you can add the simple ones easily enough. Maybe just add one of them, the middle class, if you want to have that free player experience. But when you do that, it's still 1v1. The AIs are really simple to pilot when you know the game, so you can literally have you as the working class, you as the someone else as the capitalist, and you just take it in turns, or you just work together to pilot the middle class AI. But then you could also chop and change things by saying, well, you know what? I want to play the middle class. You play the capitalist, and we'll have the working class as an AI. So it allows you to be a little bit frugal with the roles. I mean, if you really want to go nuts, you can have 2 AIs. You can basically say, well, I'm going to play the state. You play the middle class, and we'll have a working class and a capitalist automator. It can work in whatever sort of combination you want. But that's why I don't really want to put it higher on this list, because to do that you do need the extended edition or the expansion Crisis of Control to get those AIs. And you might think this is a subtle cheat on the basis that I am saying you're adding AIs to a 2-player game, but the game is still great fun if you don't have that, alright? I'm just saying it goes up to another level if you do, but even if you didn't give me the expansion, you just said, you know what, I fancy a 2-player game of hegemony and I'm capitalist and you're working class. You know what? I'd still really enjoy it. This game just works great at all player counts, and it's one of my favourite games I've played this year. Check out my review for more details on it, but, you know, warts and all, it's not, you know, a flawless game by any means, and it's certainly one that you're going to have to invest a lot of time, possibly a lot of cash, and a lot of investment in terms of table space and learning everything, but it's worth it. Check out the video for more details. For my number 6, this is on the list purely because I know that when I do play it, it's a lot of fun. Problem is, it could fall off the list, or fall off my top 100 even at this rate, if I can't get it played enough. This is one of those games that is a bit of a nightmare to get to the table. It's heavy, it's long, you're talking 3+ hours, it's got a fair amount of rules, throw in the expansion, it does improve the game quite dramatically in the combat aspect, but still, it's more rules you gotta learn, so it is a bit of a minefield to get to the table. But when you do, there is no better Star Wars game in existence that suits for 2 players, or practically multiplayer, frankly. This is just one of the best Star Wars games that's out there. Star Wars Rebellion. This is a pure head-to-head, Rebels versus Empire. The Rebels, they've got to do hit-and-run tactics, sabotage missions, misdirect, but they gotta keep their rebel base hidden. The Empire's got all the military power, all the fleet, all the nasty forces, and they're basically going out trying to capture all the rebel leaders, but also, where's that rebel base? Boom!
You may fire when ready. Big laser.
You know, like blowing up planets randomly, like blowing up Endor just so you can kill those Ewoks. You know, I mean, that's fun to do regardless if you think the rebel base is there. It's just like, you know, sir, we have documented evidence that the rebel base is not in Endor. I don't care, blow it up. You know, it's worth doing, trust me. But the game itself, great fun, wonderfully thematic. Everything in this game is like, it's great production, great look and aesthetics. This is one of the older Star Wars games, as far as I'm aware, that Fantasy Flight were doing, say, in the, you know, I forget how old it is, but I don't, maybe it's only about 7-8 years, maybe I'm just feeling old, but the game itself doesn't get talked about a lot anymore. It used to be like all the rage with 2-player games, and now there's been more games to kind of go alongside it, but it still sits on my shelf, and occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, this is like once in a blue moon, I can go, right, you know what, I'm going to sit down, learn these rules again, and then when I get it for a 2-player game with someone, we have a blast. It never goes badly. Do I wish it had a solo mode? Yes, I do. Is there a solo mode out there? I don't know. There might be some weird unofficial one. I would just wish that there was a proper official one. But you know what? If there is a really good solo mode for Star Wars Rebellion and it works, then drop it in the comments, put me a link and let me find out, because I'm keen to get it to the table more. That's why it won't go any higher, because it is very difficult to get to the table and I don't get it played very often. So it's a fantastic Star Wars game, fantastically thematic, and definitely worth checking out if you're a Star Wars fan and you want an advanced thematic 2-player game, but you gotta invest the time and the effort to do it. Oh, but it's worth it. Number 5 is... oh, yay, this is my number 5. I did not do this purposefully, okay? This is not me being cute, okay? It just happened. It's a total coincidence that my number 5 also happens to have 5 in the title. Yes, you can play this with 3 or 4, but honestly it's diminishing returns as you do, because all it does is just increases the length of the game, the amount of chaos, and the amount of chances that AP can ruin your day. It may be called 5 tribes, but you play it with 2 players, and only with 4 tribes. Or has it got 5 tribes in it? I forget.
5 is right out.
No, it has got 5 tribes in it. You get 6 with the expansion, and then suddenly it's 6 tribes, even though they don't call it that. It gets confusing. They should have really found a better name than 5 tribes, honestly. But this is definitely best played at 2. Hands down, no questions asked. I've yet to try the solo mode in it, actually. There is a solo mode I've printed for the game. I've yet to try it. But let me know in the comments if it's any good, actually. I'd like to know in advance. But this one, with 2 players, not only is the game length cut down quite dramatically, but you also have 2 pawns that you use. You end up having 2 turns each phase, and they can intersect with the other player. So when you're bidding on turn order, you might have both your goes first, they might have both of theirs. You might have one, they might have one, they might have one, you know, and it intersects. But it could be that I go first, and then they go the next 2 times, and then I go last. So that turn order becomes much more interesting when you have only 2 of you in play. Particularly when most of the time you'll bid fairly low. But it's just the fact that the board doesn't suddenly change dramatically by the time you get your turn. I mean, when you've got 4 players, that board is doing all sorts by the time it's your turn, which means you can't really plan ahead. You need to have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, in order to actually, like, prepare for your next turn. And even then, it could still go to pot, and then you get there and you've got to start thinking, right, well now I've got to think of a new move, and there's so many options, and the AP just gets ridiculous. You can convince me to play this with 3. I will outright refuse to play it with 4, but I tell you what, the last convention I was at, last time I was at Bacon, I believe, you know, I got this out with someone else. We had to kind of refresh the rules, but they're pretty straightforward, didn't take me long. But yeah, 2-player 5 tribes is the way it's at. It's just it's sound at that level. Just try not to get too many players in, and be very wary if somebody turns up and they say, oh, I'm new and I tend to think very long on my turns.
Get out! Get out of there!
My number 4 game is one of the better solo experiences, I admit. But if you are going to play it with more players, then certainly 2-player is actually really good as well. There is absolutely no point playing this with 3 or 4. It just takes way too long and there's just no need. But Imperium 1v1 is still a really fun way to play this game. A game I never thought I would like as much as I do. You know, the artwork is hit and miss for me, but I still think it's generally good. David Turksey, whenever he gets involved in any games, tends to make very complicated affairs, you know, fairly convoluted rules, and I'm like, I like this, but man, I gotta go through a lot of head scratching in order to learn it. This is no exception, because sadly Osprey Games are not very good at doing rulebooks, and this game badly needs a revised rulebook. When we get the standalone expansion later this year, I think Horizons or whatever it's called, I think it's coming with a revised rulebook. I hope they put the effort in to make it worthwhile, because this game badly needs one. But if you can conquer that rules hurdle, that rules cliff, frankly, then you are in with a treat, because this is one of the most interesting deck builders out there. It's clever how every single faction plays very differently. Yes, you're doing the same kind of thing in terms of what you play and what you're acquiring, but how each one behaves and what their goals are can be different. You know, alright, I want to try and be get the king card. Alright, well, I'm working towards those. I could be, you know what, I'm going to go through all my developments. I'm playing I'm playing the Knights of the Holy Grail. Well, I got to go find the Grail. So, you know, I've got a completely different win condition to you. You know, I might have certain things, you might not, because you're playing the Vikings. I'm being very pacifist, you're being aggressive because you're playing the Celts. You're constantly sticking unrest cards in my discard pile. It's great how asymmetric they feel, despite the fact that what you do mechanically is still the same for both players. 3 or 4, no point, it's just too long. I mean, the game's already going to take you a long time with 2 of you. But if 2 of you know what you're doing, you can go at a reasonable pace, and because all the factions behave differently, you're in with a treat for how it plays and how you interact with the opponent. Yeah, you're not necessarily, well, I mean, you are kind of directly affecting them at times. It depends which faction you're playing, but I just think it works very well solo and 2-player. Just be prepared for a bit of a test of your patience when it comes to the rules. For my number 3, I'm picking multiple games here. They're all from the same category. They're all from the same publisher. They're all from the same ballpark, effectively. But honestly, you can pick your poison with this one. I am basically talking about the LCGs from Fantasy Flight. Which LCG? Pick one. It honestly makes no difference. The three key ones I would mention though is Lord of the Rings LCG, Arkham Horror LCG, and Marvel Champions. Those three are my favourite LCGs that they've done, but they're all co-op, and they can be played solo and they can be played multiplayer. But when you play it with 3 or 4 players, it's a bit of a convoluted mess and it takes way too long. Granted, I pretty much only played them solo for the most part because that's the main time I can actually play them. But each of those 3 games is designed very well with 2 players in mind, because with Marvel Champions you typically have to deal with the boss battling you and also the threat of the scheme. So one person tends to do one thing and the other person does the other. Most of the time. I mean, obviously you can design your decks how you like.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
I'm sorry, I can't.
But in Arkham Horror, same sort of deal. One person's investigating, one person's doing the shooting. And in Lord of the Rings, you typically have 4 different spheres for the decks to design with, and typically one will do the questing and one will do the battling. Yes, you can obviously, like gear it to however you like, but that tends to be the typical way that most people gear a 2-player game for those LCGs. But all of them are great. I love all 3. Which one do I think is the best? I don't know, it comes with chops and changes at any time. It's been a long time since I got LCG Lord of the Rings out, but more and more I want to get it out again because I remember that it was just such a fun, thematic game. Arkham Horror LCG I've probably played a bit more often in the last couple of years, but that's mainly because of all the content I've played, although I must admit it's stagnated a bit recently. I still have yet to get the Scarlet Keys out, and I've got that expansion, but I've yet to actually play it. Just so many games, so little time. And Marvel Champions again. I've got a lot of recent superheroes from the X-Men lot, and I've yet to play any of them. Yeah, takes me a while to get my LCGs to the table, but all 3 of those games are solid. They're great fun when I do. I never have a bad time other than when the difficulty curve is a little bit too strong in some cases, particularly Arkham and Lord of the Rings. But actually no, Marvel Champions is guilty of that as well. You know what, power creep is just a problem in these games. But otherwise, apart from that, 2 players works great. Most of the games, in fact I think all the games on here have been competitive 2-player games. So here you've got some co-op examples. Don't do what I've done though and try and play all 3 of them at once, because it's unlikely to happen. Pick one that's your favourite theme. Lord of the Rings, Arkham Horror, superheroes from Marvel. Pick one and you can't go wrong really. For my number 2, a friend of mine, actually, a new friend of mine, has recently just acquired this game. It came in the post for her the other day. She's been learning it, like, pretty much solo all the way through, and oh, blimey, when I visit her, I cannot wait to play this game 2-player, because this is easily my favourite game that Uri Rosenberg has done, and it is just tailor-made for 2 players or solo. Granted, I've played it more solo in my time, and the expansion can up it to 3 players. Not that there's a major requirement to up it to 3 players, but it does work. But the game was originally designed as basically a 2-player game, and that is Fields of Arle. I love this Euro. This Euro is so much fun. It has climbed up my top 100, and whether I'm playing it solo or one-on-one, I'm having a blast because of the sheer amount of options. I love Caverna. Caverna is a great game. It gives you a bunch of these buildings to do, and you've got all the different action spaces. Do I want to farm? Do I want to build a mining cabin with dwarfs? Do I want to, go off adventuring? Do I want to get weapons and stuff? There's all sorts of cool stuff you can do in Caverna. Times that by 10, and you get Fields of Arle. Fields of Arle is just ridiculous. It's like, I can go farming for animals. Okay, well, I could also drain all the water from my land and harvest all the peat. Well, I could also slaughter those animals for food. That'd be good. But you know what? I've got sheep. I could also create some woolen clothing. I've got cows. I could do leather clothing instead, and maybe some winter clothing. That'd be pretty good. I could take all this stuff, all these goods, and put them to the local villages and get some food for my troubles. You know what? I could just grow my own food. I can grow corn. I can grow weeds and stuff and that. Put a few forests, get some wood there. Maybe I'll, with the expansion, maybe I'll export it overseas. That could be good. But then I could also build some ditches and do some stuff around my land. I could expand my land so that I can build more things. I've got all these tools here. I should maybe think about upgrading them.
There's a police station, fire station, restaurant, service station, and more.
Oh my word, this thing goes insane. The amount of options that you have is off the chain. And that's why I love it. Give me a game that gives me a lot of options. you know, it's not a case of, oh, it's so tight and, oh no, oh, it's crushing my face trying to work out what to do. You know, let me have some fun. Let me specialize. This is why I prefer Caverna to Agricola, because Agricola is very punishing and very tight and very, you must do this or you're going to lose. And, you know, that, I don't mind Agricola. I give it props, but it's easily surpassed by Caverna, and that is surpassed by Fields of Arle, because here it's a case of, well, yeah, the action you do might not be efficient for points, but it's a fun action. Do I want to harvest all the sheep and have so much wool that I've basically got a winter clothing line, like a brand? Yes, I can do that. Great. You know, do I want to get all the buildings? Yes, I can do that. Do I want to just ship all the stuff to my local village? Yes, I can do that. You know, I like the I can do that part of these games. That's what I enjoy a lot. You know, I may do something completely inefficient. Yeah, I've got all the cows and I've got all these leather trousers and this is my like way of getting points. Oh, I only got 70 points and you got 100. Oh well, but I still had fun. And this one, I love it. 2 players, head to head, not many worker spaces. There is contention even with only 2 of you, but the fact you can jump over to the other side from summer to winter again creates a nice little contrast for spaces. And yeah, okay, it's not necessarily totally in your face with 2 players. You could argue maybe it's a little too solitaire in some respects, but you know, it's fun to see what the opponent's building as well as you. I really enjoy this game. Favorite Uwe Rosenberg by a mile, Fields of Arle. Yeah, you called it. Did you really think that this was not going to be my number 1? I mean, I did debate whether Fields of Arle could actually make my number 1, but nah, it had to be this one. I mean, if you've seen my BGG 100, you knew this was going to be a thing, and I think pretty much every one of you out there who likes this game has to admit that this game is great at 2 players. Whether you play it solo for the most part or not, and to be fair, I play it mostly solo, but if somebody wants to play a one-on-one game of Spirit Island, then of course, I'm going to be happy to play me some of that. Yes, I do love me some 2-player Spirit Island, preferably with someone who's better than me at the game, which is not a difficult thing to do. But solo, I like playing true solo. You know, just one spirit and I let it go. Yes, I know you can have synergies in multiple spirits, but there's a lot to get in your brain, there's a lot to control and deal with on the board. I'm just happy to have one spirit. You know, as soon as you have too much admin to keep up with, the game doesn't feel fun. So when you've got 2 human players, you get that synergy, but the game doesn't drag on for hours and hours and hours and hours like it does with 3 or 4 players. You know, as much as I love the game, it is a bit of a chore to get through it 3 and 4 players. But 2 of you with 1 person who knows what they're doing as well, as long as they're not an alpha gamer, it works great. I've got a couple of friends in my local Portsmouth club who are big Spirit Island fans, and again, you know, one of them sort of got me back into the game really. And if we have done 2-player games together where we've tried to find, let's find 2 spirits that sort of sync up. Let's go for it. I can hold my own in the Spirit Island game, but I can go to his advice in terms of certain aspects because I know he knows the game better than I do. And it's so much fun. A puzzle game that 2 of you can solve. And oh yeah, I mentioned that the third was the first co-ops there, but now, I mean, this is fully co-op. So yeah, you've got my number 1 as a co-op 2-player game as opposed to competitive. But be warned, it's very technical. It's very advanced. I mean, if anybody tries to claim that Spirit Island should be on one of the other 2 lists, they are clearly on Quaaludes, because that is not possible. This game has a ton of rules. Well, actually no, it doesn't have a ton of rules, it has a ton of things that can happen within those rules. All the different card abilities, all the different edge cases, the FAQ is 20 miles long, you know, all the different things that can take place, particularly when you throw in the Jagged Earth stuff, which makes it even more complicated in places with the tokens and the various, and the spirits that you have. I mean, God blimey, some of the spirits in Jagged Earth are ridiculously complicated, and I know Nature Incarnate is on the way. Have you seen some of the spirits in Nature Incarnate? Oh my word, you're gonna need a quantum physics degree to figure out half of those spirits. So I'm a little bit concerned that they might be just jumping the shark a bit in complexity. But then I've also got the 4 spirits from Horizons of Spirit Island. Yes, I cannibalized that game like a lot of other Spirit Island players did, where it's like, Horizons is cool, that's for new players, we'll put that over there, give me the 4 spirits. And that's essentially what a lot of people probably did. But yeah, I love Spirit Island. It was my number 1 game on my top 100 before. If you're telling me that I can play this 2-player, it's gonna take a lot to drive me away from it. I'm gonna have to be doing something else, you know, more important in terms of reviews, or I just don't have enough time. But yeah, if two of us know how to play Spirit Island, it's gonna be an absolute blast. Right, so there you go, that is my top 10 two-player advanced games, and I can already hear the keys tapping for people that are annoyed that their favourite two-player game did not make this list. However, it probably is on my honourable mentions, and as I say, there's not that many really good two-player advanced games in my opinion. It was a lot easier to come up with a shortlist for the casual and the next step. But advanced was more tricky, either because I just haven't played as many of those, or because I just didn't find them as fun. And maybe there's a whole slew of these style games when you play like the Coin series, or like, you know, the games from GMT. I don't like the games from GMT, frankly, apart from, say, Dominant Species Marine. I like that one. But, yeah, I don't like those coin games. I don't like the stuff like Churchill or, you know, so-and-so Ward's Civil Leader 1871 to 1933 or whatever. You know, the titles of those games just get ridiculous and boring. I've fallen asleep before you've even explained the title to the game. There may be a ton of two-player advanced games there, but they're not ones that I enjoy. They're probably ones you do, and obviously if you do enjoy those type of games, I'm pretty sure your top 10 will just be nothing but coin games. But no, I digress. But looking on my list here, of course, why don't we get the obvious one out of the way? Where is War of the Ring? War of the Ring would probably be an 11, maybe a 12. It almost made the list. I'm in an iron about taking off through the ages, but there's a problem. I do think War of the Ring is a decent enough game. It's solid, it's thematic, it's definitely got Lord of the Rings, you know, penciled all over it. But this is a game that requires me to spend a good 4 hours playing this game. I need to learn a ton of rules. I need to know the intricacies on how all this stuff works. And then you've got to put up with weird things like, okay, so when you get to Mount Doom, it's like flipping tokens out of a bag, and then, or something like that, I can't remember. But then also, if you're playing the free peoples, then you can't attack with the elves or the dwarfs and that until somebody comes and attacks them, so that you're at war. It's kind of a weird thing, really. You're sitting on these pieces, and they can't do anything until the enemy comes at you. It's like, pretty sure you'd figure out that they were coming to attack you at some stage. I don't know. But, yeah, there was just a lot going on. And as much as I enjoyed my plays of it, it was just too much hassle, too much faff, too much that I was willing to put up with for the experience I got.
Stupid fat hobbit.
Another one is Android Netrunner. Yes, you can't get this except for the second-hand market because they've now discontinued it. But man, I used to play Android Netrunner and I had fun. This was a great LCG. Very thematic. I didn't even know much about the whole Android universe, but the idea of having your hackers going up against these corporations, and every hacker and corporation played so differently. Now, yes, there was certainly power creep, as it is with all these LCGs with competitive games. And certainly, yes, you could build the perfect deck for a combination which didn't feel that thematic, but it was like broken as all get out. That thing just happens with competitive things that you play in tournaments, which is why I never play in tournaments anymore. But Android Netrunner as a game system was still great fun. If you can get it on the second-hand market and you're willing to just play it on a casual basis with friends, you can have a really good time with this. Pixel Tactics. I don't think you can get it anymore. I think it's out of print, so I wasn't too sure I wanted to put it on the list, but it would definitely be possibly even my 10 if I could. But Pixel Tactics was this great game by Level 99 Games with, well, pixelated artwork, but you basically were fighting on a kind of like a crappy little paper map thing, but you had a vanguard, you had a mid guard and a rear guard, as well as like a sorcery thing for each card. So each card had 4 uses. All these characters, like the Necromancer, but it had a different ability to whether you played it in the front row, the middle row, or the back row, or used it as a sorcery card. So you've got this deck of like, what, 50 odd characters or whatever it was, and you've got 4 things you can do with each of them. The options were insane, the tactical possibilities endless. It was a great 2-player game, definitely advanced. I just don't think you can get it anymore. And I certainly don't have a copy myself. I played my mates. I considered Le Havre, but Le Havre I would play with 3 players. And honestly, I think 3 players is kind of a sweet spot for Le Havre. If you go above 3, it's definitely not worth it because the turn order is completely out of whack. But the game is still fun with 2 players. I'd rather play it with 3, and also you have to caveat that you must use my house rule for the loan interest. Otherwise, the game kind of, well, sucks. Well, no, not sucks, it's broken. You get loan interest for those loans, and according to the official rules, you only suffer 1 franc of interest, like 1 gold of interest, no matter how many loans you have. when you refreshed around. That enables the loan system to be completely broken to the point where taking loans in mass quantities is actually a good thing. I have seen people break the system with that official rule. House rule, 1 franc per loan. You know, the way that debt is supposed to work, you know, come on. Aye, I digress, but you've got to use that house rule, otherwise I'm not playing the half again. So yeah, not exactly top 10 material. What do we got left? We got, yes, these two. First off, the Empires of the North and Imperial Settlers combo. I do really love those games. I really love Empires of the North. But you have very little interaction with 2 players, frankly, unless you're playing a particular race, so I just pretty much play them solo. You know, Imperial Settlers I don't even own anymore. I think I got rid of it finally because Empires of the North is on the shelf and has replaced it. And whenever I feel like playing Empires of the North, I play it solo, really. So I just didn't think it had enough appeal as a 2-player game for me to shove it as my top 10. But top 20, it could maybe in the 15 to 20 mark, it could certainly feature. And then finally, yes, of course, you're probably really at my throat for this, Race for the Galaxy. Probably a top 15 game. I think it's advanced, not next step, because there's a lot of cards you got to deal with, a lot of abilities. The iconography is absolute crap when it comes to like learning how to play the game. It is one of the most unintuitive card games ever. But as much as you can play it with 3 or 4 players, I think the game sings it too. You know, having to get in the head of your one opponent to try and think, you know, what phase card are they going to play? Oh, do they play the development? I'm not sure. Because when you play it with 3 or 4, you might as well just assume that most phases are being played. And it just becomes too chaotic to work out who's got what and what everyone's doing. But one-on-one is definitely the way to play Race for the Galaxy. And I was tempted to put it on the list, but it would probably only be my 10 because I do like the game. I've yet to win it. I've yet to win the wretched thing. I don't know why. Every time I try it, I feel like I'm doing well and then somebody else beats me. And maybe it's because I don't like to do the shipping thing. I find the shipping thing to be fiddly and boring, and yet that seems to be the primary way you win the game. You ship for victory points. I'd rather just have a cool tableau of planets and get some resource production engine going, or find some development cards that give me bonus points. The problem is, it's very hard to win with that because the shipping gets you more VPs than typically doing that. But it's the way I want to play it. At some point I'll hopefully win this wretched game, but I still enjoy it. Enough to give it an honourable mention, just not for a top 10. And I'm sure a lot of you are going to put some games in the comments below that I haven't mentioned that you feel should have been on this list. And I'll be interested to know which ones they are. Because, again, this was a really hard list for me to make. The short list was much smaller for this than it was for the next step, than it was for the casual. Because I just think 2-player games tend to suit casual more. I mean, this shelf over here alone, the Cosmos shelf, right? Imhotep, best with 2. The Crew, Imhotep the Duel. Well, actually, no, not the Crew. Imhotep the Duel, Lost Cities, Kahuna, which people wondered why wasn't on the list. I like it, just wasn't top 10. Targi, you know, Babel. You know, that shelf alone has a bunch of games that I would put in the casual list that work better than a lot of the advanced 2-player games. And I guess it's just, you know, pick your poison in that regard. But hopefully you'll get some use out of these lists. I've enjoyed making them, but whew, it's time to move on to other topics, I feel. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. I'm Luke Hector, and if you like what you see, please, as I said, thumb it up on YouTube, and of course, get your comments down below about games I've talked about or not talked about. And of course, check out the other 2 top 10 lists I've done for casual 2-player games and next step 2-player games. Until next time, remember as always, regardless of what your tastes are with your gaming spouse, just have fun, the pair of you, and remember, it's only a game. Bye for now, everyone.